Just like,
I
yeah.
even skipped the gym to make sure I have enough energy for today.
It should pump
I'm
you.
kidding.
Oh.
I'm kidding. I'm way too sore, so I didn't work out today. I need a day of a
Are you
break.
filming this? This is going to be a great reel. Vitaliy skipped the gym for this.
No, I'm just too sore from the last 3 days.
It's okay. It's okay. So, you guys, today we have a very special friend. And I said I'm not going to share anything until this intro to make him feel extra uncomfortable.
Oh, thank you.
So Vitaliy is one of those people, Vitaliy right here. Vitaliy is one of those people that if you ask somebody, like they're from Seattle originally, I need to turn off my phone. But they're from Seattle originally, and we didn't know Vitaliy before I knew his wife. And when we met him, we're like, you can instantly just love Vitaliy. Everybody that we have as friends, everybody loves Vitaliy, right, Tim?
Vitaliy is also, I think he has a lot to share. I really like his
Perspective on life.
His what?
Perspective on life and
Perspective
everything.
on life, his work. I need to stop swiveling. His work ethics, just the way he does things. So I'd love to interview him and just dig a little deeper. And I think he has a lot to share.
Thank you, guys. That's a big intro to live up to. But
So, I mean, everybody we know loves you. So I think everybody on here will love you. And Tim will start with, do you want to start, Tim, with sharing a little bit why we picked Vitaliy?
oh,
Feel a little
that should be interesting.
Or like his background a little bit?
Yeah. So, okay, let's do this. So I'd like to first introduce him to you. And I actually, yesterday, I texted Vitaliy. You were on that text.
Yeah.
And I really did not want to get his profession wrong. So I asked him to describe it, and he wrote back in a language I don't speak. So, so I'm going to try to kind of explain what you do in layman's terms, and then I'll
And I can do that too. Help you
Well,
out.
I'd like
You
to
can
actually
correct it. I feel like
you.
every time I try to describe what you do, I don't think I do it right. So you do it.
Vitaliy is probably is working. He does what you and I probably wanted to do when we were growing up. Probably every person's dream job. So if I can describe this, he's the person you call if you need to, let's say you have a company worth $500 million and you need to, exit. You need to sell it. Vitaliy is the kind of guy where you call and you say, hey, look, I need you to find a buyer, or look, I need to raise a couple $100 million. That's the guy to call. to simply put it. At least that's the way I understand it.
Yeah, when I introduce myself to people that don't know my industry, I can go all fancy like that and say, I'm an investment banker that raises capital for growth for companies, or I can just say I'm a real estate broker, but for your company, right? And so it's fundamentally the same thing. We help founders, owners, entrepreneurs think about when they want to raise some money or they want to sell themselves.
That's impressive.
That sounds fancy.
Well, the part that's fancy is when you say it in the New York terms, when you say investment banking managing director from Wall Street, right? Which
Yes,
I'm no longer on Wall Street. But.
Yeah, but you were on Wall Street, so
was.
that's what's fancy.
That's when I met him. Is we actually had lunch together.
In New York.
Our families did in New York. And right around that time, I was in software. I was just trying to figure out how this whole thing works. How do you get angel investors, or how do you get like capital investments? Yeah. And then like Vitaliy was sitting there. I'm like, wait, is that what you do? That's like
Kind of, yes.
mind blown. So, but you're like in the medical field, and from what I understand, you have a big company that has different sectors, and you oversee an office here in Nashville, right?
I do, yeah. So I'm with a firm called Cascadia Capital that's headquartered in Seattle, but we've got offices sprinkled throughout the country. And we've got about 125 people and about 30 people like me that head up specific areas where we represent companies when they want to sell or they want to raise capital. So my practice area is helping medical companies, physician groups.
You're really smart in like medical talk. Anytime we talk about medicine,
I've had to get smart in the last 8 years. I don't know anything about it by education, but you kind of drill down deep and learn things. And then there's others like me that do just, food companies or beverage companies, tree farms, all sorts of different areas that have a lot of deal activity.
It's insane. So some of the conversations I talked to you about the reports you guys do is beyond me. But today we're gonna dig deep into his heart. That is.
I actually was
the
gonna
point.
say this. This is really important. Like, kind of highlights who you are as a person. But I wanna kind of go through like how we got there, and also I think one of the best qualities about you and your wife Lydia is like that you guys are super generous people. One of the like you guys have like gift for hosting and loving people. So want to dive in about like more of a personal life, and then maybe we can tie it all together. So let's talk about your childhood. When did you come to America? Tell me about your family, your upbringing.
Yeah, tell us about
a little
your
bit about
upbringing.
that.
I'm just curious to know, like, do you like? Are you from a very strict family? Did you have like this super, I don't know, successful upbringing, or like how was it like?
Yeah, so my parents came to the States from Ukraine when I was 3 years old.
What part of Ukraine?
In the middle of the country, Zaporozhye, which is historically been more Russian speaking, and so we grew up speaking Russian in our household. I remember my parents were like, speaking Russian, говори по-русски, every time we were like chatting with my brother or something like that.
Just in
Preserve
case
the
something
language.
happens with America, so you move back, right?
Well, they're just trying to preserve the language. My
preserve the
mom was a
language.
director in the local church. She was the director of the Russian school. She was a teacher, so she was very much trying to instill in us the Russian language. And so it's funny, I grew up here, but people still can observe my accents, which is interesting because of that, because I grew up speaking Russian first in up until kindergarten, and I had to learn English when I went to school in first grade. So it was kind of crazy.
That's great. How old were you when you came to US?
He said 3.
3.
Oh, 3?
So 3. So very young. So I grew up in the States. To your point, in a household that was pretty strict, pretty conservative. My dad became a pastor a little later when I was growing up, and so that should set the frame for kind of the upbringing. I remember going to elementary school, a public elementary school, and my parents saying, "You're not learning enough. You're slacking off." I would get in trouble in class, and so they ended up pulling me out. I don't remember what grade it was, second or third grade, pulling me out of public school, and they sent my brother and I to a private Christian school that was maybe the size of this big room.
Wow.
So it was a very small setting of 25 kids, and we were doing self-study. The teacher wasn't talking to us. It was basically like private homeschool, but you're going into a school setting. So that really kind of formed me who I am as a person, I think. That setting specifically, where you're going in deep and learning on your own. You're becoming a nerd in specific subjects.
Right.
So school was a big formation for me, because we didn't go to a private school, public school. We went to this very unique private school.
For like the whole time, or
Almost
just,
the whole time, since
no way.
third or fourth grade up into graduation. So
I'm sorry, I just completely spaced out. Is that like a Slavic school?
no, it wasn't. It was an
okay.
American school. It was kind of like an Amish setting. They were very conservative. You had to have uniforms.
So your parents
hands.
were pretty conservative.
My parents were not that conservative, but our family had to get rid of our television in our household.
Okay. Okay.
Because of your school?
Because of the school. Yes.
Wow.
Wow. Okay. Now we're speaking.
We were. I mean, the girls in the school had to wear skirts that were a certain length. You couldn't wear shorts or short sleeves for boys or girls. It was that kind of environment.
Since you grew up that way and now you guys have kids, how did that implement? Sorry, I'm jumping ahead, but but how did that impact? I'm like still like coming off from our last podcast about raising kids. How did that like impact
Shielding your children, right? Giselle?
the way you raise your kids.
Yeah, I do feel like there was a certain level of shielding or a greenhouse effect that maybe was too much in that environment where you were not exposed to I didn't have the traditional high school experience, for example. And so all these things that you graduate and then you go to community college and you start life, and then you're realizing, well, there's all these things
More than 20 people out there.
yeah, and it's just like you learned a lot when you should have learned it a little earlier. I mean, it was done from good intentions by my parents, but I do feel like when I'm raising my kids, I want them to be more educated about kind of the real world. I mean, this comes from the faith-based life of like, the Christian viewpoint that we want to be, raising our kids in a certain way. But I also feel like, the Bible talks about you don't want to be raising people under a cover. You want to be in the world, but not out of the world.
I was going to ask though, so being raised in such a small community, such a small school, did that limit your vision, like who you can become in some ways?
That's so interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, because or did it give you more opportunity because you're like, I just want to escape that?
I didn't feel like I had to escape it. I had friends that I was growing up with that did feel that way, and they did escape, when they were in 10th or 11th grade and they went out to community college or whatever. I didn't feel like I needed to escape it. What I found about it was that it helped me become really kind of self-starting and driven, and to pursue goals, because that was the curriculum. You set goals for yourself and then you try to drive towards that, versus kind of being a taker of information. You're sort of driven to learn on your own. And so I don't feel like it actually negatively impacted me. I know others did feel that way. I have friends that felt like, it was a bad experience for them and it didn't, it was something negative in their life. And I don't feel that way, but it certainly taught me to kind of, how do I want to raise my kids, to your earlier question, and how should I change a little bit, maybe some of the things that I learned from that.
Yeah. Did your parents have like high expectation? Like, so what was their expectation? Like looking...
Can I ask? Can I add to that? I feel like I have a good question.
Go for it.
Was your dad? You said he became a pastor here. Was he a pastor back in Ukraine?
No, he was young. He came to the States when he was 18 or 19 years old.
Wow.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
So he became a pastor when he was late 30s, probably.
Okay, so it wasn't like generational leadership where you had to become somebody in your life, or did you have any pressure? Like, I have to be someone because my dad's a pastor.
There was definitely that. My dad became pastor when I was like early teens, and so we were heavily involved in all the church things, all the ministry. Almost every weekday we were doing something, whether that's orchestra or choir or other things. And so I certainly feel like there was an expectation that, I was going to sort of take over and step into some of those things.
Oh, okay.
And there was certainly a level of disappointment by my parents when I decided to pick my own path and do my own thing. I think it's worked out okay over time, but
okay, how did you manage that? Like, they're disappointed. You're the firstborn in the family, right?
Oh, yeah, you are the firstborn.
You're the firstborn, and then you disappoint them.
In the family, right?
Myself and a younger brother.
Was there like a strain in your guys's like?
There was.
If you don't want to talk about it, we don't have to. But
there was definitely a period of time. I graduated college. I decided to move out of my parents' house before I was married. As you probably know, in Slavic culture, that's a big thing. You don't do that. It was almost viewed as a betrayal of sorts.
How old were you when you moved out?
21 or 22, something like that.
I mean,
so pretty far along in we lived far away from my work. It was over an hour commute, but ultimately that was a challenging time for my relationship with my parents. But I think over time, we sort of grow into this new view and a new relationship with our parents. It no longer becomes this high expectation and more like, hey, I want to see who you are as a person. That's another thing I learned from my kids. I want to help them grow up to be their own individuals. I want to steward them and instill in them values that are important to me, but I also don't want them to feel like they need to break out.
Set expectations. It's really hard not to set expectations.
It's definitely hard.
It's like oh, you want to be a loser? No way. You can't be a loser. I
can't-
have this plan for you.
You can't miss 13 out of, miss 2 out of 15 questions. Like I had this conversation with my second grader. I was like, you missed 2 out of the 15 questions. That's not acceptable. You should have studied more. That's the way I was raised, right? And like you need to, if you studied another extra hour, you would have done better.
It's funny because kids will be like, I have an A. I was like, what about A+, please?
Yes, you could have gotten an A+. Why not? It's not like you have nothing to do, you have anything to do.
So you said you moved out, you started your path. You probably haven't exactly probably decided on your career at that point, or did you?
Well, I graduated college, and at that point I had done several internships, and I did have. I had a job for when I moved out. So I was already kind of on my path in terms of career at that point. I definitely feel like going to and breaking out of the path of like, hey, 17, I start driving and let's go get a job in construction.
Is that what you did?
Where I didn't do that, but a lot of my friends did that.
Yeah.
And they were making money
and
right
made
away.
good money. And
For those of you that are not Slavic speaking, I mean, would you say, I don't know, there's like, at least it feels like there's like 80% of all Slavic people are in construction.
yes.
Or truck drivers.
And,
Tim had CDL. He was a truck driver.
I was a
I
truck
didn't know
driver.
that. You had a CDL.
3 months. I went to school when I was 18. It's crazy.
Yeah, because it was good money.
It was good money, and then I got kicked out. It got like, they're like, dude, you're too young. You can't be doing interstate. And I was happy.
When we're getting married, that was
happy
Tim's career.
Oh man.
You need to figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's almost like when you're growing up, you're expected to be in construction or at least truck driving. Okay, so what did you graduate in college for?
So I went to school for a business degree, and then about 2 years into it, I went from a community college, Pierce College in Washington. I went to a university around Tacoma. Then I had specialized in you pick a concentration when you study business. You have to go either marketing, finance, accounting. And so I picked the finance route. I got influenced by a couple of professors. One of them, he used to do what I do now. He used to be an investment banker back in the early 2000s, did a bunch of IPOs, and it just sounded so cool. And then he was in his like late 30s, and he had basically done this whole career and then decided to have kids late in life and said, I'm going to stop doing this and I'm going to go become a professor. And so I was in a couple of his classes, and he kind of picked up on something in me, I think, that he said, hey, you should try this out. And so he suggested a couple of internships that I pursued, and then he introduced me to my future boss as just to try it out, and they ended up hiring me. That was my first job out of college.
That's amazing.
So I got a huge head start from a professor that took notice of me. So I kind of have.
Why do you think he took notice in you? That's actually, I feel like a big pivotal moment in your life.
It is.
Like, what made you special?
I mean, he's a nice guy.
I don't know.
You're easy to talk to.
So the college I went to, Pacific Lutheran University, was relatively small classes.
I know the college.
Yeah,
My friend went there.
It's in Parkland. It's Tacoma. Yeah.
We used to live in that area.
We live on 138th Street. It's like 120th Street.
Oh yeah, it's right there.
Walking distance. Yeah.
And by the way, the reason I picked that college was that was the closest college I could go to while still living at home. Which
And
is
I think
also,
it was a conservative college too, right?
It is, yeah. It's a
more of a
Lutheran conservative college, private school, so it was also expensive. I should have gone to a state school, but it set me up for future life, so that's okay. I was paying off student loans for probably 8 years out of that college.
Wow.
Even though I only went there for 2 years.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I graduated with like 45 grand of debt. Like it was not insignificant.
Wow. Yeah. That's
2
crazy.
years. That's
And I didn't pay for dorm, right? So this added up. So why did the professor? There's two professors that noticed me. One in finance, one in just business strategy. And my view is that they noticed like this sets the conversation for kind of the rest of my life. I view like I have some level of intellect, but it's more about the grind, the grit of just pushing through. I know other people that were much smarter than me, but they didn't do as well in school, and they didn't do as well in their career. I think people rely on their natural ability a lot, especially if they do well early. People praise them, and so they ended up relying on their natural ability. And there's a lot of studies coming out right now where it's better to have a growth mindset and kind of that grit mentality. So that's part of what I want to instill in my kids.
This is interesting. Okay, I'm going to interrupt you here because you and I had this conversation some time ago about this, and I was looked at you as like you're a natural in your field, and we had this conversation where you're like, you actually mentioned that grind. You're like, no, it's about I just worked really, really hard, and it kind of like got me thinking there. So, question: do you think a skill set like that? Do you think it is something you are born with, or at least in part, or is it something I guess you develop?
I think it's something you can develop, and something that was developed in me because I went to that private school that was self-starter. You are grinding, so it helped me with that. So I think that people end up not doing that if they have this, like I said earlier, natural born ability, and they end up kind of slacking off in life and saying, "Hey, I'm smart," in the back of their heads. They're not saying this out loud, and sort of just ride through life like that. And I had some level of smarts, but I know my brother, a lot of people around me were they picked up things faster, and it just took me time. I needed to sit there and study these things and drill in deep, and that's what I credit to a lot of my sort of progression in my career is that ability to just keep grinding when it's hard.
Okay, my question is, so let's talk about grinding. You're saying like your brother is a natural, and like, for example, in school, I was a natural and like grades were easy for me. I never had homework, but I graduated top of my class. But I never took it anywhere. Probably for this exact, so like we're totally opposite. But what motivated you to grind? Like, because you could have said, hey, I'm not good at this. I can walk away. Like, for example, I'm not good at grammar. I don't care to learn about it. Thank God for AI right now. But
The very first thing you had to do,
my best friend is
the
ChatGPT.
very first thing we had to do at Mom's Dish is to hire 2 writers.
Yes.
Yeah.
I hate writing. It's never going to be my thing because I actually choose not to. So like opposite of me, you're learning all these things where you're saying you're not a natural at it. Where do you think that grind came from? Like, where did that come from? Is it part of the immigrant or is it just parents? Like, I'm curious.
I mean, it is part of the immigrant experience, right? With parents coming here with just 2 suitcases, 18 and 20 years old, and, just trying to figure it out, right? And trying to give the best life for their kids. I'm sure a lot of your listeners are immigrants and have had this experience. And my dad, I remember, worked at a roofing company. He would work 20 hours a week. My mom would drive him to work and back. He would come, take his clothes off, and put it in the corner.
Or a day?
Oh, sorry, a day.
I'm like, that's pretty chill life.
That's chill. Yeah, that's a chill job. No, and so like he would work for 6 days straight, have Sunday off, and it was just exhausted, sleeping. And I recall he did this for 5 or 7 years. So like I could see this in my parents and my dad just grinding and trying to provide for his family, and being able to get a bigger house and get the things that he wanted for his family. So I kind of had that subconsciously, I think, from the very early age to kind of observe that in my dad.
That's interesting. I've heard, I don't remember who it was. I want to say it's someone from Shark Tank. But they said something about the people that are successful are the people that had troubled upbringings.
I did not have troubled upbringing.
Well, like an immigrant would be considered troubled because like,
well, or it could be looked at as an opportunity. It could we talked about this yesterday a little bit, as being an immigrant is such a blessing because for the first time you eat a banana and you're like, I can get something else. For the first time you do something else, and it's like, it can be, it's not really trouble. To me, it was like such a big blessing. You open up a fridge, there's Coke, and you're like, oh, like the best
or
life
Cool
ever.
Whip. Like I remember when someone was saying Cool Whip, people were like obsessed with that because it was just
so bad for you.
It's so bad for you.
but I don't know her last name. That man, that's tennis player, a really famous tennis player. She was an immigrant. They came to America.
Sharapova?
Yes, I think that's what it was. And she worked hard to become a tennis player because she said of the trouble she saw the hardships her parents were going through when they came to America. And she said seeing their pain and how hard they have to work made her work harder and become who she became.
Well, I can remember this. Well, like my parents had an apartment that we lived in, not a big place, but my dad really wanted a sound system. He wanted a sound system
like
that
your
was
dad.
like, speakers, like a receiver, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so he was like, he worked overtime for 3 months to get the extra $1,000 to go and buy all this stuff. Like that was the kind of, you would set goals for yourself, you go grind, and you get that.
That's cool. I like that.
Awesome.
We had this conversation with you guys a couple of months ago. I feel like of the same thing, like set goals for yourself,
Oh, yeah.
for whatever you want to achieve, and then you chase that.
Okay, were there any moments of setbacks when you just said, I don't think I can make it, or I don't think I'm good enough, or I mean, like to become like a banker of that type, man. I can remember I tried to get a job as a teller. They said no on my first interview. I'm like, oh, that's not for me.
Money's not for me. Bye.
By the way, you don't make that much money as a teller either.
No.
Yeah, I feel like there's a certain level of imposter syndrome when you're
gonna ask about
stepping
that.
into things you haven't done before. And, you go to college, but I mean, you learn some things, but like, as we all know, education just gives you a baseline. And then any job you're going into, you're learning on the job, most of it. I was lucky in that my job actually used a lot of what I learned. I used a lot of the finance stuff. I used a lot of the business strategy things. I actually still have the textbook from my final strategy class. I went and bought it later because I lost my original one, because I just felt like it was a lot of things I can refer back to, of things that make a business special.
Wow.
Like it's not about like hardcore finance things. It's more about what I do now, which is I have to sell people or sell investors on a potential company of like, why are this company special? Why should they pay more for it? What are the sources of competitive advantage? These are all buzzy business terms, but like, why do people look at something like that? So going to your question on what are setbacks or challenges, I thought it was career was about how much you know and how smart you are. And over time, I've learned that it's more about your mindset, how you view yourself in a certain situation, how you approach whatever you're doing in your head first. So if you're coming into a conversation with a sort of a preset determination that I don't know what I'm doing, I'm scared, I'm sort of not sure what's going on, people will pick up on that, and you're not going to do well in an interview, and you're not going to get that sales done. And so for me, it's been an education. I've been doing a ton of education, especially in the last 5 years, just for myself. Like, how do I shift that mentality internally? My self-talk. What do I tell myself when I'm, approaching something new?
So what do you tell yourself?
So this goes back to me early days. I remember taking tests in school and then in college and hyping myself up. I don't know how I came up with this, but I remember hyping myself up and saying, I can do this. I can crush this. I will make 100% this test. I remember talking myself up when I would go into something challenging, like a test that I studied for it, but you're still nervous, right? When you're coming in. And I remember reading a book to my kids recently that it had the same mentality. It was this kid or whatever. It was a stuffed animal that was talking to you and saying, I'm not going to be good at tennis. And sure enough, she's not good at tennis, or whatever. I'm not going to be good in school. And she wasn't good. And then there was a situation turning around, and then she's telling herself, I can do this. Literally, the book is called I Can Do This. And then she starts doing better. So this is like now in a kid's book. And so I had this somehow, I stumbled onto this myself early on.
Have you heard of Mel Robbins? I think that's her last name. Most recent interview about 5-second rule.
No.
Okay, so I'm gonna kind of get off, but tie into what you're saying. So her thing was like, she counts, like if she doesn't wanna, like, early days before her career blew up, she counts to 5 seconds, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If alarm like ring, she counts 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. She better be out of the bed. And then anything she doesn't want to do, she's like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. She better go do it.
Like, I don't want to get up. Who wants to get up? It's not in my
so
system.
it's like this 5, 4, 3. I have to send you that interview. It's incredible. I think it's life changing. And she talks about this 5-second rule. So same thing with you. I can do this concept. I feel like we're such the mental thing, we're such a control freaks of our own lives that like if we can control those little things, they're just like so impactful. It's such a simple thing. Like I can do this, but it's like you truly have to switch your mindset, not just the words, but it's your mindset that I can do this.
Yeah, and I think that is fundamentally a big thing for me lately. Is like if I'm going into something, my job now is a lot less technical than it used to be, where it used to be spreadsheets and modeling and all these things that are technical. And now it's a lot more connecting with people.
Relationships.
It's relationships. It's selling people on myself or selling a potential client to a new investor. And so it's a lot of positioning and mindset things, and so words matter, how you say things matter, and that's I think fundamentally how you can become more successful as a person in personal life and in business is watch how you approach things in your head first.
Okay, that ties into the beginning what I said. Everybody likes Vitaliy. Everybody I know loves Vitaliy. So what is your secret sauce to be so likable?
Oh, I don't know.
Because you go into this relationships building, you have to sell people on yourself. So what are some 5 things, 3 things, 2 things, putting you on the spot? Why do you think people like you?
So I'm also a nerd. I've always been this way of like going deep on some certain topics and just
I can attest to
deep
that.
diving to things that just interest me, right?
You're one of the few people that can actually like hold a certain deep conversation.
The two of you together is like the weird world. I can just like tag along and listen.
I'd mention
Like
something
going deep on some Reddit thread.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're like AI. Like, you know, I mentioned something and you don't just like spit out a random term. You're like, no, yeah. And I'm like, wow, this guy knows.
Yeah. So for me, I like to nerd out on different things. And so 5 or 6 years ago, I realized that my career needs to shift into a new phase where I need to be less technical and more sales focused. And so I went down a path of reading books and exploring these topics of how do I connect with people? How do I sell better? How do I become more charismatic, right? All those.
So how do you become more charismatic?
How do you manipulate people? Like all these things. It's just I have like a whole set of books that I read or studied, and so how do you become likable is something I studied, for example.
Interesting.
And it's because I'm not naturally an extrovert, and I'm not naturally able to. I feel comfortable doing that, but I have to go in to a happy hour or to a conference and sell people right now as my job, and so I studied it because I'm not comfortable doing it.
Okay, we had this, we went to a conference and I was just like, so I don't know how you deal with this because I was actually thinking about how you go to conferences. And somebody that follows us came up to me and really wanted to talk to me. And I was so drained. I was so burned out. And I'm an extrovert. But there's this moment where just like my body shuts down and I do not want to talk to anybody. And she came up and she was so sweet. And I literally said hi to her and she told us how funny Tim is and everything. And I just like turned around and I was like walked away at one point. And then I was like, oh Lord, what did I just do? And I was like, I wasn't trying to be rude, but like, how do you keep that going? Like,
oh yeah.
Especially if you're not an extroverted person, it's like, how do you keep that like polished balance?
So
what do you take?
You learn yourself and you realize that, you know, it's a battery, it's a charge. And so if I'm going out to a conference for 2 days and I have 12 meetings, I'll set it up so that I have breaks in the middle of the day where sometimes it's literally like I have 5 meetings. I'll go back into my room and just lay in bed, just like zone out for 30 minutes because I need to recharge my battery, my social battery. And then I'll go back and then I'll do that again. So I'll have 2 or 3 times where I just go back to the room and just be alone, not talk, just recharge the battery. Yeah. And that is kind of what you learn about yourself. So going back to your earlier question, how do you get people to like you? Because I do want to answer that question.
Yes, sure.
the fundamental thing, if you do the research like I did, be interested in other people, what they have to say. Just lean in and be interested, really interested in what they have to say, and not interested in what you have to say or what you have to contribute, but just listen and ask interesting questions that they actually feel like they're being heard. That's the number one thing that there's studies that have been said. Why do people feel like the most popular kid in high school, the charismatic football player? Because he makes people feel known and noticed.
Oh.
Wow, that's a good one.
You know, actually, you read this, or was that like we watched this TikTok that said most popular kid in high school is the kid that asks everybody how they're doing?
That's exactly it.
Is that what you're
That's
referencing?
exactly it.
Oh, okay. I thought that was so fascinating. It's not like the cool kid. It's the person that's
That
so
blew my
cool.
mind.
Okay, what else?
Yeah.
Give us the list.
Well, I don't know that I have a checklist of things, but I feel like even in dating, I realized this later on of like how you can get connected better with people is just listen. Don't feel like you need to talk. And I do this all the time, even in my pitches nowadays, when I'm sitting and trying to pitch a potential new opportunity. Just actually actively listen and then ask questions and then mirror what they're saying, mimic what they're saying. These are all things of, you can go into a sinister way of saying like how to manipulate people. There's a book that's called like that. And those are things. Sit exactly how they sit. Repeat the words they say. They feel more like that way.
Wow, that's
Interesting.
And so I don't do all those things on purpose nowadays, but you learn some things that like help you.
I mean, you don't sit guarded like this because
Yeah, there's some body language
body
things.
language things. So that's good to know.
Yeah.
It's not to manipulate. I think we're all manipulating each other in some sort of way,
Yeah.
like to a point. I'm manipulating Tim all the time.
Most people want to feel liked, and most people want to feel that they're heard. And so those are ways you look at even like The Art of Negotiation by Chris, what's his name?
I would not know.
So there's a very
That's fine,
popular
no
book, the
problem.
number one book on negotiating. And it's not just business, it's like everything. He was like a top FBI negotiator for all these things that the FBI has to, like, hostage negotiations. And so they talk about there is like, how do you connect with people? Repeat to them what they said. My goal oftentimes is try to figure out what are people's hidden motivations. What are they not saying to you? What are they trying to? What is it that they're pursuing that you're not hearing from them? What's behind the scenes? The black swan. This book talks about.
That's interesting.
This guy's
I'm
smart.
I'm like blown away. I feel like Vitaliy, we need to have you here for 6 hours. You're not going home.
Let's talk about all the books you read. Oh, man,
Okay,
that's-
Tim, do you want to
that's,
ask the next question?
well-
you have the list of questions.
yeah, some of those actually you hit on some subjects that we talked about in our previous podcast, mental health.
Okay.
And from what I understand, your job can be up and down every month.
Yes.
Depending, because your sales are so major, the amount of effort. One of those times you actually explain all the reports that you do, and for even sales that are even potential like sales, the amount of work that you guys put in is just out of this world. And so some of those sales, I'm assuming, can go through. Some of those do not go through. How do you cope up with the bad ones?
Yeah. Most of our projects that we work on average, take 9 months. And so you work on 3 projects a year. And, there's
Can you imagine? It's not like a Burger King that you're selling every hour. And no
or like a
customer,
real
that's
estate
okay.
agent that you can sell 3 or 4 homes a month. And maybe you don't sell 1 month as well, but like it's volume. Here it's the opposite of that.
Wow.
Someone said in my industry when I was just starting that like we eat like lions. It's rare, but it's a feast or famine type of thing.
Exactly. Feast
It's
or famine.
exactly like that. And so it takes 9 months, and half of the deals fall apart, and they can fall apart for so many different things. And so you as an intermediary, which is what our job is, you almost have no control over any of these things. And so you're sort of on this roller coaster. You're just up and down, just exactly the way you said, Tim. And so you, over time, you can either be on this roller coaster and have a huge stress in your life, which I have had. And, it's challenging to manage then your personal life and your family life, because it's fundamentally, make or break it. If this one event in this one week could make your income be either as good as it was last year or a quarter of what it was last year, and it's just in one key pivotal moment that week.
That's crazy.
Versus most people have this sort of like steady thing. You can kind of see it going one way or the other. Here it's like it can, a coin flip, and all of a sudden something happened. And so for me, I've spent some time kind of again studying and how do you kind of manage that mindset. There's podcasts that I feel like are good on this.
You can mention them if you want.
I need to pull up my phone to talk about some of them, but it talks about what are the things you can control. This is simple things, right? Like what can you control versus not, and then think about what happens, whatever is stressing you out right now. How would you view this 5 years from now or 10 years from now? Is this really going to be that important? So if let's say this deal that I'm working on, it falls apart. In 10 years from now, will I even remember it? Probably not. And so it's putting things in a bigger perspective. Same thing, by the way, people talk about this, about raising kids, right? It can be stressful. It can be challenging. They test you as a person. They test, they push their boundaries. And so how do you manage your own emotions? Because most of the time it's managing yourself more than it is managing them and raising them. And so how do you manage your emotions? Again, you try to zoom out. Take 5 seconds and zoom out and say, in 5 years, timeouts, exactly. In 5 years, is this going to matter? Is this fight going to matter? By the way, this applies the same thing about marriage. This applies in so many different things in life. Like, is this argument going to matter in 5 years from now? Probably not. So stop it and stop talking.
Well, sometimes you need to nail it down because it could be a growing argument, like a growing issue.
Sure. And I'm not saying avoid and run from problems. I'm saying think about if this is a growing issue, then address it.
Yeah.
But if in 5 years it is, the next argument about who's loading the dishwasher or leaving dishes in the sink, which, by the way, my wife and I have sometimes. This is
you
important.
have to have a teen boy. They'll do it, or like teen kid. They'll do it for you. Pay him $3. $3 every time he unloads dishes.
Exactly.
It's the key to marriage success. $3 a day.
Just don't tell him we're underpaying him.
You better not listen to this. Yes, but I think the bigger point is keep things in perspective over a longer period of time.
Yeah,
that's a good way to look at it. I remember I had a sales job, but mine was not like yours in any way, but it's so emotional. It's
Yes,
so
it
hard.
is.
It's like I have cried. I mean, there are deals, not like thousands, and we had a lot of deals.
Everybody at your job cried.
Well,
'Cause it was like
or they took
the whole floor of sales
balancing pills to balance them out. I didn't. My balance was Nordstrom across the street.
Which is interesting because that is something we learn about your job, is how many people were abusing pills.
Yeah.
A bunch of people in our
Adderall.
industry do all the time. They're all hooked up on Adderall, or it's also
Adderall's
because
a big
you
one.
have to work hard, especially earlier in your career. People are working 100 hours a week.
Yeah, you have to be focused.
They have to be focused. You have to operate on 4 or 5 hours of sleep. And I'm not doing that now, but when I was starting up, that was the case. And so again, it's the kind of the grind thing. But
The case
people
for
can
taking pills, or
no, the case for grinding.
grinding. Just wanna
Pills,
clarify.
I have not done that.
It sounded almost like you did. Glad that you clarified. I didn't want to question it.
So what is the thing? Do you have a natural, I guess, remedy or natural approach?
How do you recharge?
How
Yeah.
do you recharge?
I personally have found, for me, recharging is being in nature. And so, like, now that I have a home with a backyard, for me, just going out and just staring out at the forest in my backyard, that was one of the requirements I had when we were looking for a home to buy here in Nashville, is to have that. And that's like a huge recharge for me.
You mentioned like stepping outside in the morning to catch
looking at that sun.
To catch sun. So I talked about this earlier. I nerd out on certain topics, and so there's a topic of optimizing your body for the rest of the day. And so you wake up, you feel sleepy, tired. First thing you want to do is drink coffee. well, the better thing you should do is go out and stare at the sun for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and that clears all the fogginess in your head. Then sure, go have coffee after that.
I tried it, by the way.
Did it
After
work?
you share, I don't know. I still want coffee.
So
But I
there's
did
a whole
try it.
science around like adenosine in your brain, and the adenosine gets muted by coffee, but you really want to clear it out with bright light from the sun, and then you have a better circadian rhythm. You go to sleep on time. You have better rest the next day. So it's sort of a cascade thing.
It's funny because after you shared that, it was around summertime. We talked about this topic with you. And we have a little garden. You guys, the garden is literally the size of this chair. So every morning I would go out to the garden, stare at a little bit and sit there in the sun and be like, this is my meditation. What can we do for the winter time when it's gloomy? Do we need a greenhouse with the garden with special lights and we just walk around there?
You could just go out in the backyard and just have coffee.
When it's 10 degrees, no thank
yeah,
you.
it's a little bit tougher in the winter.
But another thing to add, Vitaliy also has a very hot sauna and very cold plunge.
Yes.
Yes.
So that's like the whole thing of optimizing for health. Although I feel like Slavic people have known this for a long time before all the,
We
books
knew the
came out.
secret.
Yes.
We all knew the secret
Yes.
before everybody else
Banya,
knew,
right?
found out. Yeah, banya.
Yes. All right, cool. I mean, that really covers the journey. That
No, I
wanted
want to talk about his values.
his values.
The New York topic.
Okay. I mean, we do have other questions.
Do you? And I want to touch that, and then we can ask questions.
All right, sweet.
So when we accidentally, we kind of overlapped. It's not accidental. A trip in New York. So Vitaliy and Lydia, his wife, lived in New York for some time. So we're like, they give us a tour. And in New York, this topic came up, and like I said before, you guys host a lot. You give back a lot. Can you share a little bit about that? Like, does it burn you out? Like, the amount of hosting you guys do is insane. Like, I love hosting people, but after 1-2 times, I'm like, leave. I do love having people, but I'm just saying.
So that's me being a supportive husband more than it is my personal vision.
Oh, really?
The hosting thing. Yes.
Well,
Okay, but Tim doesn't like it either. So let's talk about some marriage issues here. You're like, please limit to 10 people.
I know.
And please don't plan this for another
Once
3
every
months.
6 months.
Yes. So how do you support, like, how do you overcome that? Like, your wife hosting people, she's very talented at it, by the way, you
is.
guys. She's very good at it.
And she loves it.
And she loves it. She thrives, and she's like, it's her talent.
So I feel like in marriage, I've had to learn new skills that I did not know how to do to support my wife and support our marriage, support the things that are important for us as a family unit. And so this is one of those things. I feel like we struggled with this in New York City because we didn't have a big group of friends, and we lived there for 5 years. We made some relationships, but they were not nearly as planted and rooted. When we moved here to Nashville, it was, one of the things that was on our hearts of we want to have a friend group, and we want to nurture and develop relationships with other people that are kind of that we can do life with together. And that's been a deliberate thing when we first moved to Nashville. And then my wife was like, well, then we have to be inviting people over. We have to actually invest into this. We have to make a deliberate effort.
gotta invest into it, yeah.
Okay. Because most people don't immediately think, hey, we should invite people over, right? And so if you want that to be part of your life, you have to make an effort. And so it's a sacrifice. It's, for me, oftentimes, especially meeting new people, it's like, oh, this is a lot of work.
You do this for work already.
I already do this for work. This is a lot of work. It's better when you're meeting with people. For me, it's better when you're meeting with people you already know. It's not as draining, but you're meeting new people and entertaining them. Those are things that are extra effort. But you also get out of it, just like anything in life. You get out of it how much you put into it. And so if you show up and just kind of not put in a lot of effort, you're not going to get a lot of out of that, and vice versa.
I think a lot of people complain about like friendships in general. And I always said this, like when we lived in Washington, we're very involved with like friends we always would host. Not at the level you guys do it, of course, but we would like every week we had friends over. It was like a thing that we did. And people would be like, you have so many friends, you have this people. Well, if you don't have any friends, I think if anything you take away from this, well, there's so many lessons. But if you don't have friends, start inviting people over. We have had 8 months of not having a railing in our house. Remember when we did a remodel? And we still had people over. My dad made some kind of a lumber type of railing so kids don't fall over. They could have easily fallen over, but we still had people over. It was just we went through so many seasons, and I think people overlook that part. So it's kind of. And I know a lot of the friendships women mainly crave it. That's probably why it's a sacrifice that, like, Tim can care less. He just needs one friend in his lifetime and he was good.
I need friends, but the thing is, you outdo me in every part. So I see so many people day to day. So I'm like, maybe that's plenty for the week.
I have this conversation with Lydia all the time of like, hey, maybe we need to like do it once a month instead of every week, weekends. And then it ends up being every weekend somehow.
It's
not
just
a purpose.
a weekend.
But to your point, like it is, it's life giving. It's you build each other up. Like we had friends over a couple of days ago, and we even had this like this was edifying. It like elevates your like you learn things from each other. You're not meant to do life alone, and so I think we all are social animals. Some of us need breaks, and that's okay, but I also think we need to embrace the fact that we all need other humans around us.
Yeah, so no AI, humans.
Well said. I was actually taken back a little bit. Wait, is that a good way of saying? I was taken
back is like
aback. No, I was
taken back like it's like you did not like it.
Okay, no. I was surprised and in awe. Actually,
you were impressed?
I was super impressed about some of the things he said. The generosity and your goals for this year, and it's almost like as if generosity.
Can we share a little bit, because like
Yeah.
I think you need like a little bit more context to what you're saying.
Almost
so
like
this comes from New York trip, what Vitaliy shared with us. Can you share what he shared?
well, I'm not gonna share. I don't know what can be shared, what not. So
Okay,
let Vitaliy
let
decide on
Vitaliy
that.
share better.
But what my question is like, is that part of your motivation? Like, hey, if I work harder this year, I can give more, and almost like that's how it felt.
Yeah. So talking about generosity, this is a newer journey for me in the last 2 or 3 years, and for our family. We part of our church, we had what was called a night of generosity, where they invited people that are kind of business leaders, and they invited people to speak to this event. That invited the CEO of Hobby Lobby, who's a obviously that's a very big business.
Are they from here?
I think they are from Tennessee. It's a $1 billion business, right. and this is run by a Christian family. That business was started by a father, and then his son was the one that was actually doing the speaking. He kind of took over. In his book that he referenced, he talked about how their business grew by leaps and bounds when they changed their mindset about not just building a business for themselves, but building a business that could support others, but also building a business that they can tithe from. And so they made a commitment to tithe out of their business, and they would set goals to be generous out of their business first. And then they individually had, their own personal goals when they took money out of the business. Right. And so what I took out of that is to set goals for myself, not based on, I want to make X amount this next year, but I want to be able to be generous and give this amount next year, and sort of set bigger goals each year. And so, if I'm making up the numbers. If last year I was able to give $5,000, this year I want to do $10,000, and then the year after that I said I want to do $30,000. Right? So it's like this incremental but exponential growth.
I'm pretty sure the numbers are a lot higher than that.
I use sample numbers, and so that's what we've been living through with my wife in the last 3 or 4 years. 3 years, I guess. Kind of setting those kind of goals for our income, and living a faith-based life. For us, it was, leaning into, and this has also helped with my stress, rather than being like, I need to be able to hit a certain revenue goal because, we have bills to pay. It's more about, hey, I'm going to sort of relinquish control. because I can't control a lot of the things that happen in our work and in my business. And so I'm going to relinquish control. Instead, I'm going to give this sort of goal that, hey, if I can set this goal, I'm going to give it to God. And if he wants me to be generous with this amount, then I'm going to do it. And so this past year, we were able to do as much as I made my first year out of college, right? Like even more than that, actually. And so it was kind of this like breakthrough moment for me of like, hey, if I can really set my goals to be not consumptive, I don't want to just consume things. And we obviously want to live a good life, have a good home, all those things, and want to buy a boat or whatever, right? So all those fun things in life.
We live in America, overconsumption.
It's consumption, but like if you zoom out, it actually makes life a lot more fulfilling if you can kind of set those kinds of goals of giving. And so this goes back to hosting, which is not cheap, right, to do just financially, besides sort of like morally.
I mean, those steaks or whatever you served the other day, they're not cheap.
It's all those things, right?
Right.
But it's this, but also on the giving front, that's been kind of a driving force, and it's helped me just be more relaxed about the roller coaster of my job too.
That's amazing.
Which is, can I add a little bit to that? Which is so cool. And I think it's such a big part, for example, of what we do. And it's, yes, there's the financial part. And then there's also like what you do. Like you and I have like a heart in this. We want to help people. You want to serve people. So with the recipe, you're saying, I just want to help people with the recipes. So even like in our business.
Mom's Dish, when we started, we said that we'll never have monetization. We ended up doing monetization, but I think this part right here is kind of fun. I feel like this is another way we're giving back.
Yeah, it's just like everything that you do, it's so much more fun, so much more enjoyable when you don't do it for financial reasons, although that's important, but because you can help people. And I mean, I think that's really impressive.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of things I've studied, like I said, random topics and how do you become more successful on social media, because my wife used to do that a little bit more, or other things. And it's really more about being authentic yourself and doing things for other reason, not the money part. And the money will come, basically, on anything in life, I feel like.
Yeah. People flock to the people that love to help.
Yes.
I mean, that's how we work, right?
Solve problems for people. If you can solve problems from people and be around successful people, you'll end up, being in a good place financially too.
Yeah.
That's cool. I love that. I love that you shared that. So thank you.
It. I always want to end on this note, but we have a couple more questions.
Rapid fire questions.
Rapid fire.
Do you want to ask yours? Do you have one?
No, just go ahead and start.
Okay, so Tim didn't see these questions. I love to do this at the end of every podcast because I think it makes it fun. A key to happy marriage. Just describe it in one word if you can, but you can add to it. Listen to your wife.
Speak less.
Speak less. What if you want the other partner to speak more? Like
no, me. I speak less.
I know, but like sometimes I want him to react. Like he just like walks away. I'm like, please speak, sir.
And in an argument, you want me to
Keep
argue
talking.
back. Yeah.
So we had this conversation a couple of weeks ago with my wife. She was frustrated about something I did. It was not like a big thing. It was just something that I keep doing, and it was just frustrating to her. And she said it to me, and I'm just like, that's ridiculous, but. Okay, if that bothers her, I'm gonna do better. And I didn't say anything. It's just like, okay, I just said that. She's like, why aren't you saying more things? I'm like, okay, like I hear you.
But that can come off as defensive.
Sure, it can.
That was like our biggest issue at the beginning of our marriage, where Tim would just be like, whatever, like walk away. And I'm like, wait a minute, come back and you talk to me.
So the alternative is for me to react and say, well, this is stupid. This is a waste of conversation. Why are we talking about this? Like, this is not that hard. Why are we fighting about this? And then that's not going to end in peace. It's going to end in escalation and more conflict.
That was our issue, is like, I would not talk. Okay, I'm not getting on your level. And
Yeah, he was like the angel, I was the devil. He was
Ah.
like, I'm not getting on your level. You right there, you hang out. I got it. Bye.
Okay.
And
I'm
for
hanging
me-
out with Jesus.
for me, for me, the learning moment is like when I realized I need to actually engage in a dialogue.
Well, I think it's each relationship is a little different.
That's true, too.
And each person is a little different. For us, if I engage in a dialogue and I react, then it becomes a bigger thing, and it most of the time shouldn't be a bigger thing. And so, and even if I do have something to say and it's important, what I found is what we talked about before, the 5-second rule, but it's longer than that. Let emotions cool off and then have the conversation later. If it's something more fundamental that's important, let's let things cool off and then have a conversation on cooler heads.
That's very true.
So speak
That's-
less in the moment.
in the moment, yes.
We just have a dialogue. That's why we have podcasts. We're like, oh, time for podcasts. Let's solve our issues.
I
So
feel
it's therapy for you guys. Okay.
Yeah.
we do. It's like we do therapy on public level.
Okay.
Everybody gets to see our therapy.
That's what it is.
Okay, people, welcome to our home. You get to see everything. Your favorite way to unwind?
That's an interesting one. I feel like it's changing over time. It used to be more on social media, or just be like mindlessly scrolling. And I feel
We're
like
all
a
guilty.
lot of us do that, right? Instagram or Twitter or
Now
whatever.
I play games, Vitaliy.
Yeah,
I can introduce you to some of my games. I play game to unwind.
play this one
It's
game.
hilarious. I'm a gamer.
I've done that before. And so this year, I'm trying to do more reading. Before I've been kind of doing podcasting, this kind of self-development, but I feel like when I'm reading, I actually have to really focus and get back to kind of sharpening my mind, as I feel like social media has made me a little bit dumber.
That's true.
that's what it
Lazier.
does.
We
Yes,
consume so
lazier.
much information so fast.
Yeah. So stop and be deliberate. Like I've been reading a book at home that it's kind of dense, and I have to reread it a few times sometimes. It was like, this is humbling, and it's a good thing for me to slow down a little bit.
That's how I feel with all the books.
No, it's
After
funny.
you read through, like,
We got invited to this business interview. You can cut this out. And the questions that they asked, I felt so stupid. I kept on like rereading it. Like we had to do this like survey at the end of the meeting, and everybody's like really high level at the meeting. Just like they're talking about 7 to 8 figures. Please cut this out.
No, I'm not. This is perfect.
And they're like all like really high level people.
They
And I'm
use the
sitting there, I'm like, am I
fancy
that dumb?
words.
Like I don't understand anything.
You don't
I keep on
understand the words?
rereading it.
ChatGPT, can you simplify this for me?
But it was like a survey, so I had to get it done. I was like, this is hard. 2nd grade level, please.
It's like, hypothetically speaking, what is your like?
What was
Yeah.
the question?
It was a lot of hard questions about your business, like what are the areas that you can improve and all this stuff. It's very
Yeah,
interesting.
but it's in a language that like
It's business
very
language.
professional, very like next level. But I also felt like I haven't read in so long.
it's like a language I would use to make somebody feel really dumb.
Yeah, that's on purpose. Yes. Yeah.
No, it's not. I don't think it was on purpose.
I think I
but
need to talk to them about that feedback. Be like, hey, like,
yeah,
dumb it down, please.
You know, speak English.
This survey was challenging. I did not know what you were
yeah,
asking.
sometimes it's better to just be direct and down
Yeah.
to earth. I don't know.
Well, that's another learning for me. Like I used to feel like I need to fluff things, how I say things, how I write emails, just sound smarter. It also comes from a place of insecurity. I feel that that imposter syndrome is like, well, I've got this important persona and job and thing to portray, and that's to better be authentic and to the point and direct. And I still struggle with that sometimes, of just kind of fluffing things up to make myself sound better, right?
You know, it's funny. I used to, when I did marketing, I worked at attorneys. And attorneys are considered to be like the highest level people, the smartest. They do so much education. And bringing back to the point where I don't have any grammar skills.
Yeah.
I was still successful at my job. Like I did a good job. And I think what made me more relatable to them is because of all my mistakes. Because I was just like that one after, like, what the heck is happening with my inbox right now? I need to get back to this desperate girl.
Her last name is longer than the message she wrote.
That's true. But
How do you
I
pronounce
think,
it? Yeah.
I think it was just more relatable. Like, it's like sometimes when I read these professional emails, it's just like I just feel like, where's the humanity in people? Like, where's your granddaughter or daughter? Like,
So
those are the people you remember.
here's a small thing. I sometimes still write that way, and I've been lately putting my emails through ChatGPT and saying, make this sound less formal.
Oh, that's smart. Less
Or
formal.
if you need to be the other way, make it sound more formal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Talking about AI.
Less is better.
Bring in your family and kids. You're like, my wife is annoying. Or my children
It
drive me
translates
insane.
Yeah.
A book that changed your life. I feel like you talked about so many books. That's actually a really good
Atomic
question.
Habits.
Okay, I have that book.
I'm sure everyone has heard that, or that's a name that's familiar to a lot of people. What I like, the idea about Atomic Habits is that you don't need to make these massive changes like, oh, I want to lose weight, or I want to change my career, or I want to improve my relationship, and sort of like this massive transformation. It's about the 1 degree shift. I like the story that the book starts with, where it says, if a plane is leaving San Francisco and they change the degree of the plane like 5 feet, like where it's pointed to,
Tiny bit.
a tiny bit when it's standing on the runway in San Francisco. But if it's changed there, it goes from flying to New York, its intended destination, to DC, which is 4 hours away, right? Like it's this massive change if you apply it over a period of time and over a distance. And so all you need to do is apply small daily incremental changes. This goes back to the obsession about small details. Over time, they stack up to make big monumental differences over time.
That's a good book. Have you read it?
Still struggling through my book.
Your obsessions?
No, it's some biology book. Like, oh, I'm gonna figure out how I
Oh, by the way,
work.
I don't read books fully. I'll read like half of it, and I'll flip through the next 5 chapters later. I'll go online and say, what are the chapters that are interesting, and I don't have time to read all of them.
I need to get Audible, because I just think, even though like you said, we need to practice reading, it's just easier to listen.
Yes, it is easier.
Okay, your dream destination. You guys traveled quite a bit. You didn't touch on this, but you guys traveled quite a bit. You traveled a lot before too, for work.
Yeah, I do travel a lot for work, having to fly around and meet clients. And so flying is not necessarily on my like bucket list of another thing I want to do. But we do like to travel. We do like to explore new cultures. I had this conversation with my wife 2 days ago, I think. She asked me what's my dream destination, and I was like, I don't know. I haven't set a goal for the next one. Her and I said the same place, which I thought was interesting. This new kind of idea for me is going to Japan.
Everybody's going to Japan.
It's a thing, but like
It's a thing of 2025. Have you heard about it?
apparently it is.
It's like the new
But
Italy.
I didn't realize that. I just landed on it myself because we lived in New York City for 5 years, and so it's got the big city thing of Tokyo and Osaka, but it also has a lot of beautiful nature. You go out into the mountains, which is something that, as we talked earlier, this conversation refills my soul. And so I want to experience that at some point, although it's a very long travel to get there.
Okay, one thing that instantly lifts your mood. Coffee.
Music.
Music.
Um,
you like music.
Yeah. And for me, music has been, it used to be, it would put me in a melancholic mood. I'm naturally a pessimist and melancholic. And so I would listen to that kind of music, and it would just give me more of that. And sort of like, it's again, setting your being intentional about how you set yourself up. You can have a good day or a bad day. It's your choice. It's nothing else around you. And so if you set yourself up with, and music has this amazing ability of setting the mood, even though you might not feel it. And it sets the tone for the rest of your day.
I'm struggling here thinking the type of music you're listening to. Is it classic?
It depends on the day. I listen to classic. I'll listen to Christian hip hop. I'll listen to gospel music. I'll listen to jazz. It depends on the mood.
Jim listens to opera music. I'm not even kidding you.
I used to listen to opera music. I'm not in that phase anymore.
I walk into the office. It's like, what is
He's
happening?
like, I need someone to yell at me for just a little bit. Yeah, I know.
I'm not a music person, but sometimes they'll have a good playlist that's like, turn it up. I like it.
You do that.
That's cool. Okay, one last question is one daily habit that improves your mindset. Or sets your mindset, not improves.
One
Sorry.
daily habit? How would you know if it's daily?
Well, maybe something he does every day.
Something that you do every day.
Frequent?
It's like a routine. Daily routine.
Cold plunge?
That's I wish I was that disciplined.
You work out.
I do work out
Yes,
5-6 times a week, and so that's a good daily habit. I've heard someone say that it's something like drain your body, sharpen your mind, or something like that, which I thought was interesting.
That is
I mean, my job, and a lot of our jobs are nowadays sitting around, right? You're sitting in the office, you're sitting in the car or whatever. So our bodies are meant to move. Our bodies are meant to be used, and we don't use them nearly as much as we should. I feel like that's another kind of topic to talk about at some other future conversation, that the new way to measure your success or wealth is by your health. If you look at a lot of people, a lot of people that are successful that were not in shape go into shape. You look at Bezos, you look at Zuckerberg, you look at all these people. Once they've achieved the sort of pinnacle of business success, then they realize, oh wait, this is not worth much if I'm not feeling great.
Die soon.
Yes, exactly. And I wanna actually feel good in my body as I'm doing this. So working out's one, and then just kind of the mindset of setting yourself like, today is going to be a good day. Today is going to be a great day. I don't consciously do that anymore, but it's a subconscious thing. If you start your day with that kind of mentality, over time, it just sets a very positive tone in your life versus what I used to be, which was like, this is going to be a challenging day. I've got all these things I need to deal with. And I still have to deal with them.
Really?
I think you should start like this whole new career on the side of talking to people that today is going to be a good day. I actually think there's something to it. This is my marketing brain thinking. Okay. But I think you can help a lot of people. Mel Robbins, going back to her, she started Let Them. Have you heard of that theory? She wrote a whole book about it. She's big. Like, I don't really listen to her, but that was one podcast. And her idea is like, let them. Like, if somebody didn't invite you, let them. If somebody is upset with you, let them. It's their emotions, not something you can control. So she's like, if somebody doesn't like you, let them. Like, they have a choice. Like, you can't control them. Like, you can only control your emotions.
It's a way of saying let it go.
But it's like a simple phrase that we don't think about. Same thing. Like, today is going to be a good day. I'm literally going to put something in my house. Like, today is going to be a good day. It's a good reminder because sometimes we get up and it's like, oh, I went to bed late. Today's going to be a crappy day.
I have this challenging meeting. I have got these things to overcome. Yep.
And like yesterday we were filming Tim. It took Tim 2 hours to set up some of this. And I was like, oh, this interview. And I was like, nope, I'm going to focus on something else because it's like we control our emotions. Like, so that's cool.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things we can't control in our life, but the one thing we can control is how we think, what we think about, and how we feel about ourselves. And that's really the only thing you can control in life is what you're thinking about. You can control and tell yourself what to think. And everything else around your life, your spouse, your work, almost none of that you can really control. And so if you can control that one thing that you can control, it can improve your life.
That's really cool. Mic drop. And also, I was like thinking, we're going to invite Vitaliy. He's going to give us a secret to success financially. And we walk away very happy.
I just did it, right? Control what you think about. Yeah. If you say you suck and you're not going to do well, then you're not going to do that.
Okay, so a little commercial break for Vitaliy. For pitch for Vitaliy. If somebody has a clinic or any business that you're thinking about selling, or if you're thinking about I don't know, can you share what they're thinking about? Why would they need you? Yeah, You'll share better.
So if you're growing your business and you need to raise money to go expand into the next grow it another 20%, or you want to find a partner that that helps you scale the business to a new level, or if you've just been thinking, hey, I've built it to a certain level and I think I can hand it off to someone else at this point. That's what, there's a whole industry of folks like me that deal with this. I can help on the medical side, but I've got a lot of colleagues that help on all sorts of different companies, tech, consumer, food, you name it, they probably do it. HVAC, residential, trucking. There's bankers that just do all those things in our firm.
Okay, and how do they find you? We're going to put it in a notes, whatever this is going to be at, but how do they find you?
Hey, they can Google your name.
Yeah, they can just Google us, Vitaliy Marchenko at Cascadia Capital, and you can find me there.
Okay, cool.
Well,
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank
being
you.
with us.
Thanks for having
Thanks
me.
for being here.
Yeah.
This was awesome. You
was
nailed
great.
it. Seriously. High five. High
Thank
five
you.
to everybody.
Here.
This was
Very
good.
nice. That was great.
Did you feel comfortable?